I'm going to hand over to Simon to actually introduce Dan, because Simon knows Dan of of old, and he's got some stories I think he's going to tell about Dan.
Oh dear. I won't tell any stories just to save any blushes. But it is a real pleasure to have Dan here tonight with us. For the last 15, 16 years, I've known Dan, and honestly, if he turns his hand to anything, he's unfairly good at it almost straight away. He's just written a brilliant new book, which I hope he's going to tell us about, and should be a very, very interesting talk tonight. Dan, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Simon. I'm glad you didn't share any of those stories. We were at university together, so people can have their own imagination as to what was potentially on there. I'm just going to start sharing screen and then play this. But I'd like to just ask a couple of things. One of the things I found with doing some Zooms is it's really nice if some people at least do keep their cameras on. So I feel like I'm talking to real people rather than a screen in a room on my own. So that'd be great if a few people could do that. And I'd just like to also say thank you very much for coming. We have had, I'm going to talk a bit about how the book that we've written came to life, and then just share some of the stuff and go beyond what's in chapter 1. So if you haven't read it, don't worry, you know, there's no need to have read anything. And then if you have read it and you want to explore some things, you've got some questions, that's great. And then if I haven't covered anything, do feel free to just hang around at the end and we can have a chat about things that are falling or how things are landing for you and stuff. So without further ado, this is me. I grew up in central London. It's a really, like literally by King's Cross Station. Platform 1 was 1 minute from my house. So it's probably not the most auspicious place to, definitely not the most obvious place to have grown up, to have the career that I've been fortunate enough to have so far. So it was kind of through scouting, as I'm sure a few people have been involved in when I was younger. And then we had a couple of youth clubs on the canal in London that kind of did some water sports as part of their youth development. So I got into paddling. And that paddling is, without by far and away, my most favourite thing to do. Whitewater kayaking is like what really excites me. It's what I go and do the most. If I had an option out of all the things I do, I'd go whitewater kayaking first, as long as it was good. But I'm also a really keen skier and mountaineer and climber as well. So I currently live in Kendal, in the Lake District. So I can walk and get on the Kent from my doorstep, which is amazing. And I really enjoy that. And I've got a wife and a young daughter called Robin, who's 1. So she's been keeping us busy this last year, which has been a real blessing. I have got, and I'm fortunate enough to have got a load of different badges from different organisations in the UK. So I guess that's part of the story about how we came to the point of having a book. So that's there. And then I really enjoyed doing things. I absolutely love being outside and doing different things. And I find that being able to go climbing or paddling means that no matter what the conditions are and the weather and stuff that we've got, I can go and do something that I personally find fulfilling, which I really enjoy. So this evening, you've signed up to listen to me tell you a little bit about how the book came about. And then we're going to delve into some of the concepts that affect us as coaches and look at our coaching philosophy, situational awareness, decision making, and something about critical reflective practice. Now, I'm not planning on talking for more than about 45 minutes or so. And then we have some questions and stuff, but we'll have to see how it goes, because it is the first time I've given this presentation. It's kind of an amalgamation of a few different things I've been doing. So you're seeing it here first, folks. And obviously there's a little plug for buying our book if you haven't bought it already. So a few years ago, I signed on to the British Canoeing Coaching Diploma, which was called the UKCC Level 4 at that time when I started it. And then they changed the name because it's British Canoeing and that's kind of how they roll. It's great. and I was already, so when I started this, just to give you some background, I'd been a level 5 coach for 5 years. So I had quite a breadth, I thought I had quite a breadth and depth of experience. You know, I'd worked in national centres. I was the lead instructor for the military in terms of subject matter expert paddle sports. So I'm like thinking, oh, I'll do it because I'm not quite sure that I've got all the background that I want to have about coaching and sports coaching and all that, and it includes some academic work. And so I started, and I was reading papers like this, and I'm just thinking, this is great. Like, there's really, really interesting nuggets of information there that we just can't get out to people. You know, I hadn't picked up an academic paper for about 10 years before starting this. So I'm thinking, like, and in my mind, there's like a massive gap between what's available for us as normal coaches that are just working as coaches or in a canoe club, and then the gap between that and then what these academics are talking about is huge. So I'm going, so that's in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, right, how can I incorporate some of this teaching in and these thoughts into my actual practice? And it kind of, that triggered something in the back of my mind. So we're here reading loads and loads of academic papers and stuff, and I was getting a bit, bit bored. So if you don't know the UKCC Level 4, you do like 2/3 of a master's at Stirling University, and then you do some applying what you've learned into actual coaching practice with these visits where people come and watch you coach and you have professional discussions about it and stuff. And I found it really interesting to go through the process. But, you know, it's a huge commitment, isn't it? You know, doing 2/3 of a master's and then all these other things as well. So about halfway through that, I was on a trip to Nepal, and we spent a lot of time in jeeps and rattling around. And I was with some other friends who work as coaches. And we're kind of going, we exhausted all of our jokes that we had. And we kind of like, well, what do we talk about now? And I started talking about some of the stuff that I've been learning and thinking about by doing this process. And then like the next day, we're like, oh, we've exhausted all our jokes and we've all heard them all again. So we're kind of going, right, what should we talk about now? Then we started talking about what we'd want to see in a coaching handbook if we were going to write one. And that kind of gave me a vague chapter list. And at the same time as this, my friend Paul Smith, who I wrote the book with, had been like badgering and kind of chatting vaguely about writing a book about coaching and stuff because we felt like there was a need for it and things. But, you know, in the real world, you're going, well, I'm not going to sit down and write a book. That's the sort of thing clever people do. You know, I failed my A levels and I've become a paddling coach. But there's definitely a need for it, we felt, out there. So this is a workshop we delivered in February this year, February pre-pandemic, a year ago, because people are too close together for it to be this year, for mountain training, which is a teaching and learning workshop for people that hold mountain training awards, so like ML holders or single pitch award holders. It's now called the Rock Climbing Instructor Award. And it was really apparent that there was a lack of resources and support to adventure sports coaches in their delivery. You know, there's nothing that people can turn to and go, oh, that's really what I need to be thinking about, or oh, I really want to know more about asking questions to people, but I don't really know where to go and look for this. There was nothing that bridged the gap between research and actual practice. And it's kind of like, after we do a coach education course, after a core training, we're leaving people's development totally to chance. You're like, go out into the wide world, watch some YouTube videos, try not to pick up a 5G conspiracy theory off the back of it, and get on with developing as a coach. And then, literally 3 weeks after delivering these workshops with Paul, and having had several rants to each other about the fact that we should write this book and we're never going to write this book and we've got a chapter list and we've done nothing with it and stuff, the whole world stopped literally it was like, oh, turn the keys, right, everyone stay there. And so we set out, and we actually started writing in April this year. But before we started, we actually set ourselves some aims. We wanted to make sure we'd written and created something that was in plain English and wasn't academicized. I don't know if anyone reads academic papers and stuff as part of their work, but there can be an absolute nugget of information, a complete gold gem, but it's just hidden in amongst all these really long words that just mean nothing to me. We wanted to make sure that it was based on evidence rather than our biases. So like, I know what I like talking about when I'm coaching, and I know like how I like to coach, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best way to coach. So making sure we're basing what we're writing on evidence. And we wanted to create a comprehensive resource that is as valuable to existing coaches as it is to people coming into coaching. So kind of with those few ideas in mind, we set about writing. And then there was one other really important thing, and I wanted to make sure that it was the book that I would want to read earlier in my career. So that isn't a dense, heavily packed textbook. It's something with lots of pictures in and easy accessible diagrams and stories from other people. And this is, if you haven't seen it, this is, I'm really blown away by actually what we achieved, because it's 360 pages long. It's probably a really comprehensive overview, even if that's us saying it, of current coaching and current coach thinking, with some new sort of thoughts in there, like teaching people about managing fear rather than letting that develop ad hocly, for people as they're starting out working in a whitewater environment. And this is just a sample page, and then, if you don't have it, we'll put some links up at the end of the session. Right, but that is the end of the plug, I promise. Okay. And now we're going to talk about adventure sports and coaching adventure sports, which is what you've all signed up to actually talk about. So an adventure sport, and this is something I'd never thought about before doing the master. Like, what is an adventure sport? There's actually a definition for that. It's something that takes place in a natural and unmanaged environment that requires specific technical skills to partake in. You're using your body to travel through the environment that you're taking part in, and that the environment you're in can be constantly changing. So an adventure sport would be going whitewater kayaking, because we're going whitewater kayaking, the river levels could go up and down. We are in charge of that boat, and it's only us that has control over that boat. But going kayaking at home pier point is not really, in that true definition, an adventure sport, because it's taking place in a managed or maintained environment. So that's definitely something to just get in our heads, because I found that really interesting when I started thinking about it. So we can train and practice in these environments, but we're trying to develop people that can go and work in these environments. As adventure sports coaches, we're trying to develop independent participants. These are people that can come to us, get some input, and their probable goal is to be able to go and do things on their own. That's not to say that has to be their goal, but their probable goal is to be able to go kayaking or climbing or whatever it is on their own. So that might mean that we have to fulfill, and this is where we kind of get arguing about semantics and stuff. We fulfill several roles for those people. So you might be acting as a guide as they start out. You're just taking them on journeys through the environment, so they start to learn more about the environment. And then as they become more aware and more independent in that environment, you then give them some instruction, and then you coach their performance. Then eventually you might end up just having a phone call with people and going, oh, can you just have a look at the river levels? Do you think that's about the right level for me to go and get on with my partner? And you're going, yeah, that looks great to me. There's nothing crazy going on. So you end up working as that mentor. That's important, because that should affect how we coach, because we're trying to develop people that are capable of making their own decisions. We're not just trying to teach people technical skills. And that's probably quite a big that's been one of the big seismic changes in my thinking over the last 5 years or so, is that I'm not just teaching people how to do the sport, but I'm teaching them the bigger things and questions and pictures behind making the decisions. Which affects my coaching and the way I behave quite a bit. This is a model from Lowell Collins, who, it's a bit of a, like, it's a piece of work that is fairly like category defining for us, because until 2013 there was no definition of what an adventure sport coach actually was. And so they came up with this idea that we're either working in performance development, working as a guide to give people personal experiences, or working as a teacher. So that's where we might be doing sort of Duke of Edinburgh's work, or taking people out in an outward bound sense where they have an experience and try to learn and develop their ability to talk to each other and their relationships with their peers and things. That team building side of the outdoor world we work in. And running all the way through that at all times is this welfare and safety strand. So we are always taking care of and looking after the people we're with, and that always comes back to us as the coach. And the other thing that they found is that our personal ability in the environment is completely interrelated with the welfare and safety of the participants. So we need to be competent and capable in the environments we're working in order to look after the welfare and safety of the other people, which is where an adventure sports coach differs from like a traditional sports coach, where, you know, I don't need to be as good at kicking a football as Pele to be Pele's coach. And I don't know much about football. You might have noticed that there. But, you know, but I need to be as good as the participants I'm working with if I'm developing them to be independent. You know, there's definitely a segue there into, like, if people are performing and they're like paddling like Bren Orton does, you know, they're probably not going to have a coach that is better than them in that environment. But normally for us as adventure sports coaches, we need to be better than the people we're taking out, because we need to be able to look after their welfare and safety in the environment that they're operating in. So that's our role, that's our job. And in order to fulfill that role effectively, we need a few things about us. We need to have an understanding of how we teach things, so the coaching process. We need to have some personal skills in the environment. That kind of gives us, I'm guessing that because it's a With Dave chat, we've got quite a few people that are paddle sports focused, like myself. So, you know, this tells us what we're teaching, doesn't it? You know, if I don't know anything about my own personal performance in the environment, I can't teach people to do that. And then we need to be able to read and relate to people. And it's kind of like British Canoeing summed this up in there. If anyone's done a course recently, a Coach Ed course, like the how to teach, what to teach, and who we're teaching to model. And this is just different words, I guess, in the same sphere. So our ability to do those is what's really interesting to me, and it's constrained by these four elements. So our ability to properly make good decisions and reflect about what we've delivered and how we could do it differently is constrained by our philosophy. And our philosophy feeds into our relationships and our ability to have good, effective relationships with people, as well as feeding into us making decisions about what and how we're going to coach things. We need to be good at reflective practice, because we operate in unique, every time we go out on the river or on the crags or on the lake, or whatever, it's actually a unique situation. So in order to make sense of that unique situation, we needed to have reflected on the previous experiences that we've had. We need to have really good situational awareness. We're going to talk about situational awareness in a minute, because it's so important. But our ability to read people And our ability to read the environment that we're taking people into is critical for us. And then incorporating all of that together into our decision-making process is really important. So the rest of this talk, we're just going to explore each of those 4 elements in a little bit more detail for the next 20, 25 minutes or so. When I started my coaching diploma, this was the first thing we had to do. We had to talk about our coaching philosophy. And, you know, this is me coming into this, fairly experienced coach, done a lot of different work, got a lot of NGBs, high level stuff. I'm going, how's this got any relevance? I want to know how to be a better coach. I'm going, that's it. All right, I'll play along. And that's genuinely the thought process that went through my head. And I bet it's the same thought process that's going through hundreds of people's heads every time they come on a coach education course at the moment. But the more I thought about and learned about philosophy and my philosophy and how that impacts on us, the more I was like, oh my God, this is so important. How did I not know anything? And I felt really shortchanged. I didn't know more about this earlier in my career. So it's the most hidden of our behind the scenes processes. It's the one that we don't have to share. We don't have to openly share our philosophy with other people if we don't want to. The Oxford English Dictionary says it's a theory or attitude that acts as a guiding principle for behaviour. Now, if we go back to those earlier slides, we're thinking, well, our behaviour as a coach has a huge impact on all those different things. So this philosophy is impacting on our behaviour, that's then impacting on our coaching processes. Actually really important for us to know something about. Making this more explicit, even if it's intrinsically explicit, so we're more aware of it ourselves, really supports us in our decision-making process, because when we reflect, we can reflect not only on what we did, but also why we did it, which is really important. So here's my coaching philosophy. To support individuals to realise their ambitions and goals. It's got like a very definite mission statement here. I aim to achieve this through inspiring, challenging and thought-provoking interactions. I believe that the key to coaching success is rooted in honesty and openness, hard work, mutual respect, whilst remembering that above all else, we should be enjoying ourselves. And I think that enjoyment thing, it's actually really important to me. You know, I don't go out in Scottish winter to have just an epic day of being blasted around in the face by spindrift. Like, I go out because I actually get some enjoyment. It might be type 2 enjoyment. And definitely there's a lot of type 2 enjoyment, I think, in what some of the things we do, but there has to be an element of enjoyment in this for me. So my philosophy, and everyone's philosophy can be completely different as long as it's kind of really relevant and true to you as a person. But it kind of says what I want to do, how I'm going to do it, and some background to how I'm going to do it. And there's a really pretty picture of us on the Socha doing that, hopefully. You know, so I do find myself, and I when I'm watching myself work, thinking back, I do find myself thinking, God, you spent a lot of time just asking people questions, didn't you? And hopefully it's because that's just directly linked to that philosophy and the idea of challenging their thought processes rather than just giving them solutions. And here's another time that this would take probably most of us, if we were a whitewater paddler, it would probably take you about 2 minutes to solve. You know, you've probably seen about 3 or 4 different solutions from where those 2 guys are stood on that rock in order to solve that problem. But coming back to my philosophy, you know, this is a fantastic, naturally occurring challenge. you know, someone had swam, their boat got pinned. Great. And just having the philosophy running as my program in my background goes, no, Dan, you don't need to jump in and solve this. You can just let those guys solve this problem. You know, you could be there to make sure they're safe and no one's going to end up pinned upstream of the boat. But actually, this is the best thought-provoking interaction you could have for people. You know, a genuine situation and scenario. So hopefully that just kind of frames a little bit more about that philosophy piece for people. So we're just going to talk now about situational awareness. And there's 3 key factors for us as adventure sports coaches that we take into account. Environmental comprehension, so awareness of the world around us. The people we're with and the comprehension of those. And then us, our behaviours, and the session we are delivering. We're just going to explore each of those. So situational awareness, in the initial thoughts, was the process of noticing the environment. So, you know, if we're open canoeing, we need to notice what the wind's doing. Understand, what does me seeing those white caps or feeling the strong gust of wind on my cheek, what does that actually mean? And then predicting what the impact of what I'm experiencing is on the plan I have. So, for example, do a lot of whitewater paddling. I'm on the Conway. It's quite high already, and it carries on raining. Now, if you know anything about the Conway catchment, it's like a huge sponge. So as soon as it's high and more rain falls on it, there's no more absorption left in the ground. So it just instantly fills the river. So you're going, well, it wasn't forecast to be raining, but it's definitely raining really heavily at the moment. Does that mean that I should get on this river with this team of people when the river's already really high? It's kind of like that first stage in that environmental comprehension. The second strand of situational awareness for us in the adventure sports world is the people we're working with. So going back to that Conway example, the river's already really high. Are the people I'm taking out for the day, the participants, are they looking scared or excited? You know, what is the impact of that environment on them? You know, see this a lot in sea kayaking, where all of a sudden there's a bit of clapilotus, which is where the waves are reacting and bouncing, and you're getting random waves underneath your boat. You're kind of going, are they rolling with these punches, or is this just freaking them out? Then trying to get some understanding of why they're reacting to a situation like that. It might be that it's the first time they've ever experienced it, and they're going, ooh. It might be that they're thinking, this is a great opportunity. I'm really ready for a high level descent of the Y. You know, I've done it loads of times, but I really want to just go and get involved in that sort of environment. They might be excited by it. But predicting what the impact of that is on the plan we have is really important for us. So we've got 2 strands at the moment. We've got the environment itself, and then the impact of the environment on the people we're with. Also need to be aware of us and the session we're running. So noticing the impact on the people we're with, either us and our behaviours or the session we're delivering. So that could be, let's go back to that Conway example, the river's really high, people are looking a bit nervous. And then I jump on and start getting people to try to ferry glide underneath the get-on bridge in a really high flow, and they're not really sure what's around the corner or anything. They're probably going to be really nervous about doing something like that. What they want to do is just follow me downriver for about half a K just to get some movement under their belt and get used to that environment. As a good adventure sports coach, we should be noticing these 3 things together, drawing them into our understanding why they're feeling like that, or why they're reacting to me or the session, and then making some predictions. We're looking to the future and thinking about what we're going to do, taking into account all those different things. the other strand with this is, are we setting the people we're giving tasks to or little sessions we're delivering, are we setting the task too hard or too easy? Are people engaged in the session? Are they not engaged in the session? Because going, oh, Fred's not engaged. Fred just must be a really lazy person. Oi, Fred, do it again but better. Isn't coaching. Going, oh, Fred. And Fred goes, oh, actually, I've done that, Dan. I did that last week. Yeah, all right, okay. I'll just give you something else and add another layer of complexity onto this. And then all of a sudden I've understood and predicted, oh, if I just keep shouting at Fred, he'll just become disengaged. So I'll give him a different challenge. That's still situational awareness for us as coaches. And situational awareness is completely interlinked with our decision-making processes. So this is Helvellyn, Striding Edge. Very, very famous scene of multiple mountain rescues and accidents and things. This is Kate, my wife. She's now my wife. She was my wife in this picture. She wasn't my wife the first time we went up on Striding Edge in winter conditions. I'll tell you about 2 different times we've been out. So on this day we're looking at now, you know, Kate and I at this point, we've been together about 8 years. We've been to the Alps, mountaineering. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time in Scotland. We looked at the weather forecast, absolute bluebird day. You know, there'd been a load of old snow. It'd been a while since it had snowed, so we knew the snow we were going to end up stood on was going to be really hard, compact. We had some crampons in our bag, very light. We went round for a little circuit, up Striding Edge and down Thurl Edge. That's like the classic Helvellyn day out. We had a fantastic time this term, you know. And the first time I tried to go up Helvellyn with Kate in winter conditions, we hadn't even got onto the edge because it was the first time Kate had ever worn crampons. And obviously I thought it was a good idea to go and do Striding Edge. I'm lucky Kate is married to me now, having taken on that experience that didn't result in a very nice day out for anyone. The point of those 2 stories are, we're talking about decision making. How did we end up in a situation where young Dan didn't know anything and kind of did that to Kate, and older Dan made a really good choices on this day, and we had a lovely time. We were down in Glenbidding having a cup of tea by 2:30 in the afternoon. My situational awareness of my participants has grown loads. It's not just the conditions that I was thinking about, it's the people I was with and matching the people that I'm taking out into the environment that we're going into. And that for me is like at the starting point of our decision-making process as adventure sports coaches. So our situational awareness feeds directly into our decision-making process. Decision-making, you could also think about decision-making as the choices we're making. So I, as the coach, I would normally choose, you know, where we go and what we do as a general rule of thumb, because I'm working with people who are like, I want to do this and I want to work towards this and stuff. And I'm like, okay, the best environment for us to go and do that is this. But sometimes if I'm trying to develop people to be independent, then I might not need to make those decisions. I might want to just step back and say, well, where do you think we should go? But people need to be at the right stage of their development for those sort of questions and that choice to make. So I need to make a conscious decision about who's going to be making the decisions. It's like nearly Zen. So decision making is an integral part of our work. Decision making at its rawest form is like 2 different processes. So there's a slow decision-making process and a fast decision-making process. So the slow decision-making process is where we make decisions kind of rationally. You know, I sit down and I think, oh, what river am I going to go to today? You know, where am I going to, if I'm sea kayaking on Anglesey, where am I going to go to tomorrow? I look at a weather forecast and I take into account what I know about the tidal movements, and I can come up with a fairly robust plan for where I'm going to go to and what I'm going to do. That's a classical decision-making process. Taking my decisions in slow time. Someone falls in a tide race, I'm going to be making some pretty rapid decisions, aren't I? Like, where do I need to send the rest of the group to? What's going to happen to the person? Are they going to get separated from the boat? I'm having to make a lot of decisions in pretty fast time when scenarios happen, or when things happen for real, as an example. So what we are trying to look at doing with our situational awareness is supporting us to make some decisions that are taking into account as much information as we can process. That's really important, so I don't make the wrong decision. So my decision-making processes are directly fed by my situational awareness and my ability to have good situational awareness. We work as event sports coaches in really dynamic, risk-intense environments. By risk-intense, I mean there is a lot of inherent risk in the environment. If we do the wrong thing, that risk then becomes a problem for us. So what we want to avoid doing is doing the wrong thing if we can. Coming back to that point in a moment. Now, if we had to think, if I challenged you to think about what it is you're making decisions on when you go out with work or coach or anything, I reckon you could categorize them into these three rough headings. So some stuff about where we're going to go, and that's going to also be fed in by what the environment's doing, you know, how wet it is, how windy it is, all those sort of things. We're thinking about the location also based on the participants, their ability, their experience levels, you know, what they want out of the day, what kit have they got, all these sort of questions. We as the coach are the person that's juggling all of those bits together. And that's before we've even decided how we're going to teach, what we're going to be teaching that day. So our decision-making is, our decision-making processes are already working really rapidly a lot of the time. So we are underpinning everything. There's a lot of factors that go into our ability to make decisions. And we want to think about developing really robust decision-making processes. Becoming more self-aware has been proven to support your decision-making processes. We're linking all the way back to our philosophy now, aren't we? You know, and that kind of like those hidden behaviors that are controlling us without us understanding really what's going on. Yeah. Self-awareness is one of the things that helps us get better at decision-making. Reflection and reflective practice helps us get better at decision-making because we can examine a decision and think, not only what did I do, was it good or bad, what would I have done if, is another really good question to ask yourself in your practice. You know, if we hadn't got that boat off that rock with this method, what would I have done next? All the way through to, what would I have done here if they hadn't managed to swim themselves to the side at that point? Purposefully practicing decision-making, and by that I don't just mean going out and thinking I'm making a decision now, going out and thinking about what we've reflected on and then how can we develop that forwards. Steal ideas from other people. It's great, honestly, it's brilliant. Yeah. It's like a shortcut to all of this stuff, isn't it? You're just like, oh, Dan did it like that and that works really well. As long as you make sure you're doing that in the right place with the right people. Try and get some varied experience. You know, so if you normally work with the under 18s at Clondissel, for example, go and work, just get in touch with the guys at Home Pierpoint and ask if you can come down for a session and just observe them working. You're getting varied experience and you're getting to steal loads of good ideas. Like, genius. You can do formal qualification courses that kind of expose you to new information. And you can further your understanding sorry, there's something. Yeah, sharing information with others. So this is a really important point as well. In fact, so important. Sharing information with others is like one of the most powerful learning tools that I think I've experienced is listening to other people tell you when they've made mistakes, and then they're learning from those mistakes that they've taken. I think that's absolute gold dust, and we should be open to sharing information with other people, and then furthering understanding, reading a book, for example, or looking up a bit of paper, or going, actually, I want to know more about questioning, and purposefully going out and finding out a little bit more about how different coaches are using questioning in their practice. All these things can help us do this thing called recognition primed decision making. That's where we're finding a best fit solution to a problem in a very quick fired, that naturalistic, oh no, I've got to do something straight away. Recognition primed decision making is where we recognize a scenario unfolding in front of us, and we can very rapidly select a best fit solution to the problem without having to look at all the different aspects of that problem. It's something that came out of the fire service, because each fire scenario is unique, and yet firemen manage to put out a lot of fires, and they don't actually end up having that many big accidents considering the hazards that they're dealing with. And they've recognised through the research they did with the fire brigade that it's linked to this recognition prime decision making processes, where they're turning up at a scene and they can kind of project forwards. If I do this, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen. Very much like our situational awareness is. They go, right, okay, well, that will work. Let's just do that. And they don't worry about looking at all the other options once they've seen a solution that will fix the problem. So they don't get hung up on this whole decision making in a classical way where you're trying to weigh everything up. They just see a solution and get on with fixing the problem. But as with all decision making, there's a problem with it. Just heuristics, right, is really interesting because they're just shortcuts in the decision making process that we do every day. Different to a heuristic. Heuristic is a shortcut in the decision making process. Yeah, if you think about it, let's just take the process of I'll use the one from the book. I'm sorry if you've read it. What you had for breakfast this morning. Every morning I get up and have a bowl of muesli with some yogurt on it. It doesn't matter whether I'm going to go and climb Helvellyn or I'm just going to sit in front of the Zoom all day. That's what I have for breakfast. I don't take into account what my calorific output's going to be and how much energy and when I'm going to need slow release and fast release energy. I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I probably should know something about that, but I don't take any into account. I get up and have my breakfast and then I go out and get on with my day. That's a shortcut in the decision-making process. Because if I was there to weigh out how much muesli I need to eat before I go and climb on the Ben in winter or something like that, I'd still be there at 10 o'clock in the morning and all the ice has fallen off because it's got warm. We need to shortcut the decision-making process. The problem occurs with shortcutting and heuristics is when we take the wrong shortcut and end up in a blind alley. This has come a lot out of skiing and avalanche education recently, and they talk about heuristic traps. So that's when people rely on the wrong information and they take the wrong information from the environment or the people they're with or anything and base their decision on that rather than a rational decision-making process. Like the fact that quite often people will be like, oh, I've driven all the way to North Wales. I want to paddle Ferry Glen. I'm going to get on it, even though it's running at 3.2 on the gauge or something. That's commitment. That's because they've got there, and that's what they were going to do that weekend. They're going to ignore all the other environmental factors, and they're just going to get on whatever river it is they've come to get on. And we do see that a lot in the paddling world. Although I do believe we've got much better recently. I'm definitely fully guilty of being involved in canoe clubs where we go, well, it's Tuesday. We always paddle the loop on Tuesday. I don't care if it's like through all 3 arches and over the slab. I'm getting on the dart loop and I'm paddling it no matter what. That's commitment in a nutshell. And that's a shortcut in the decision-making process, because I've driven there. I'm like, I'm paddling the loop. I'm not going to look at any other information. I'm just going to get there and paddle the dart loop. That's not a very good decision. If you've got the wrong people to take into that environment, you just end up doing a lot of picking of bits up and chase baiting and things. There's actually like 127 like errors and biases that have been identified as shortcuts in our decision-making process. I won't talk about all of them. Skiing education have got a really nice thing called facets, because they're the big biases that come out in avalanche scenarios, which like familiarity with the environment. You're like, oh, it never slides this slope. Yeah, I'm probably fully guilty of that with the Kent here. Like, I walk over from my house and just get on the Kent, you know, and paddle down it. I don't think much about going soloing or any of that sort of stuff. I'm probably in real danger of falling into a heuristic trap of familiarity with that environment. I'm aware of that, but am I aware of that enough to make good decisions? Yeah, it's just something to think about. So some key takeaways before we talk about reflective practice. Our philosophy impacts on our decision-making process. Our situational awareness also impacts on our decision-making process. Decision-making is the key. It's what we do as as people. You know, we make choices every day. You know, choose what can of beer to pull out the fridge, all the way through to how much milk to put in my tea. They're the only decisions I'm kind of making at the moment, so I'm staying in my house, but you know, there are multiple decisions. One of the good things for us as coaches is that by sharing both what we are seeing and what that means to us, we can support all the people we're working with to develop their decision making. It's a really small, simple change we can make. You know, think about what cues we're picking up from the environment and about the people we're with and our behaviours, and then explaining to our participants what that means and what I'm then going to change based on what I've seen is one small change that we can make in our coaching practice that has huge benefits to our participants. So reflective practice is something of a passion of mine. It's what I ended up following that coaching diploma through, and I've topped up the 2/3 of a master's by doing a dissertation. I wrote my dissertation on developing reflective practice in adventure sports coaches. Reflective practice is not just thinking about what we did. You know, it's not just I did this session in this way and that was good. We also want to look at why we took the actions we took. So for us as adventure sports coaches, it's not just thinking back to and going, oh, that's what I did. This was good, this was bad. Why did I make that choice? Why did I make that decision? And starting to understand a bit more of our thought processes. It's critical to our developing situational awareness, robust decision making, and also developing our self-awareness so we can be aware of our philosophy and the hidden thought processes we've got going on behind us. I'm pretty certain everyone will be fairly familiar with the Kolb cycle or something. There's another model here called Gibbs that's worth just making a note of and Googling if you've not bought the book. But it tries to take you beyond that description of what happened, but also examine your feelings and try to make you evaluate some stuff about what was good and bad, and taking it on into some sense making, and then actually trying to get people to record an action plan. Because so often, and I'm fully guilty of this myself, you know, I'll drive home from working for the day or paddling or whatever. I'm thinking, oh, that was really good. Yeah. No, or no, I'm not sure about what I did there or how I said that. Maybe I should try doing this next time. I make no record of what I thought, oh, I should do this next time. Make no record of that. And next time I'm like, out there. I'm like, oh, I had another way to say this, but I've forgotten it. So I'll just say the same thing that I've always done. Doing the same thing we've always done is not a way to get better, is it? It's called the Gibbs, like just Google Gibbs, it'll come up. Gibbs reflective practice. It's kind of, it's a slightly more powerful tool than some of the ones that we've been given traditionally in some coach education environments.
There's a link in the chat for that now, Dan.
Thanks, Simon. And we're into the questions element of our evening. I might come out of screen sharing, then if that's okay, so I can see people again. Hey, so any questions?
Yeah, we've got one question. Mark, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. That's the only question we've got at the moment. I'm sure Simon's got a few questions though. If you've got some questions, chuck them in the chat for me and we can make a list of them. So Mark, you ask your question.
I was actually hoping you were asking the question because I can't pronounce the word. Do you have is there a difference between your philosophy and the epistemology, the E word that everybody was using? I didn't drink tonight, so I can't pronounce it.
That's good. So epistemology is one of those funny words that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm just going to Google so I can give some background for everyone. So epistemology is the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to the methods, validity and scope, and the distinction between justified belief and opinion. So that's like that very tight dictionary definition, and we're kind of getting into some deep philosophical beliefs and chats here about how you believe that people learn best, and these kind of areas. Whereas my personal coaching philosophy is more about what I personally believe about that epistemology to be, and how I'm going to make my behaviors match my belief system about how people learn. So I if we go back to mine, where I say I believe in like trying to make thought-provoking interactions, I can link that back all the way through to me coming through the level 5 process. Where we go out and we get mentored by people and nobody would give me an answer. They'd just ask me questions. And I used to find that really frustrating at first, Like I remember being on the river and Lowell's going, "Oh, why are you teaching that?" I'm like, well, "What would you teach?" And he's like, I'm not here to ask you I'm not here to tell you what I'd teach. I'm here to ask you why it is that you're teaching what you're teaching." And I'm going, I don't bloody know. It just seemed like the obvious thing to do. And that's like, and that's come through now, and I definitely see that in myself as a coach. And that doesn't, I'm not afraid to give people answers, but I like to get them to the point where they look like they're about to headbutt me before I'll give them that solution. Does that answer that question at all? Did I just ramble for a bit there?
Bit of both.
Bit of both. Yeah, I thought so, Mark John.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. A question now from Steve's iPad, please.
Yes, hello Daniel. I just asked the question as, what do you think you learned from doing your BCU Level 5 course to completing your diploma?
I guess when I went through that Level 5 process, and this is probably personal for me rather than a critique of the system, I was very much focused on learning what I was teaching. I was like trying to learn the intricacies of paddling technique and trying to understand exactly how that boost stroke works so that I could teach that effectively. And then going through that coaching diploma process, I've kind of got onto the thinking about teaching decision making and sharing situational awareness rather than getting too bogged down into technical detail for people, because that's been a bit of a shift in my philosophy, I believe, I guess, about teaching as well. So I don't just teach technique now. In fact, I find myself teaching less and less technique, but more and more awareness for people of the environment that we're in, so they can then start working out their own tactics for dealing with it. Does that answer that?
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah. Feel free. I'm really robust. So if I've kind of waffled and not answered a question, just
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Having gone through that process myself, I would say I had a completely different experience to you, because my mentors all came from educational background, and so a lot of the reflective practices and getting them to ask questions and redoing it, and getting them to try different things in different ways. I mean, for instance, I had to teach playboating. I'm not a playboater, but by the end of it, because we were working the area we're working on, they improved, and I got more knowledge of playboating.
Yeah, great. I'll tell you what I really love about the outdoors is that we've all had such different experiences, and yet we've all come to like the same purpose and point in our lives. And I think that's one of the best things about the outdoor industry as a general.
I mean, I personally think that not only mine, but a friend who's had it more recently, the ML process was the worst assessment ever. You talk about not answering any questions, a whole day and they wouldn't answer any questions, just tell you where to go. Appalling.
As an ML director myself, I'm going to.
That's a cop out, that is, Dan. Complete cop out. We've got a question from Simon Westgarth.
Oh, it wasn't really a question. I was kind of helping out Dan with his explanation of the epistemology.
You can tell that you've been spending too much time in higher education at the moment, Simon. So.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. You have to help all the students. Yeah, so epistemology is the big thing, and the easiest way to explain it is the difference between when someone knows what to do because of the base on their wisdom and their knowledge, and then when another person believes what they should do, and that's based on their opinion. And the two are, one is based on substantive experience, the other one is just based on, well, that's what I think. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Simon.
I think you've stunned him into silence there, Simon. Well done. No, that's cool. The other Steve's got a question.
Yeah, hi. I might not be as experienced in coaching as lots of you on here, but the book seems to promote learning and understanding by giving tasks for clients to do, and then to reflect on how they've done it and how they could improve, and like that. But what would you recommend? How would you move someone on who just wants to be told what to do and doesn't want to actually reflect?
It's really interesting, and I think so. I work for those of you who don't know. I work half time for myself, and then I work half time for an organisation called Joint Service Mountain Training Centres, which is the military equivalent of a national centre. So we teach people in the military to be adventurous training instructors. So quite often, Steve, I'll find that I'm working with people that are down the end of the spectrum, that they like to get told what to do, and they like to be told exactly what they have to do in order to pass the course. They like to be told exactly what they have to do in order to, deliver this lesson in this way, in this format, because that's their cultural background that they're coming from, where that's what they expect. And I'm like down this other end of the, well, what do you think sort of school of teaching? And you can imagine there's been especially when I started out, there's been a few clashes. So I definitely started to understand what people's motivations are and their expectations of education, in terms of, these people that I work with in the military, they are expected and they're taught from day one, you just do what you're told, and it's only much later on in their career that they're allowed to think outside the box and do what they think they should do rather than just what they're told to do, which takes us on to that whole idea of, I want to just get told what to do. And you're like, right, okay, well, let's start by just giving them one choice to make. You know,
Okay.
what one thing, and you're like, okay, well, they've made that one choice, they've made that one decision, you know, or they've. So if you, one of the bits in the book that's probably worth revisiting for this is that Mostrom spectrum, the teaching spectrum of
Right.
who's making the decisions, and just link that to, instead of them making the decisions, them having the choice to practice that one thing or this one thing, sort of thing, and then you can start linking in a couple of choices for them and link in a few choices for them. So it might be you start off going, oh, what do you want to focus on today? Your forward paddling or your sweep, you know, whatever, your forward paddling or your sweep strokes, and they go, oh yeah, I found myself actually like spinning out quite a lot last week, so can we just focus on sweep strokes? That's it. That's them starting to reflect back and then look forwards.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, and then come on and on. Yeah, good luck. Or just
Thank
give them
you.
the answer and then try to coach someone else next week. Any other questions?
Dan, when you're coaching different sports, which you often do you find there's a lot of crossover, or do you have to very much change your approach depending on what activity you're coaching?
Unsurprisingly, I reflected a lot on that while Paul and I were writing. It was so I think back. So I'm really fortunate. I get to teach ice climbing in Canada every few years. Like, I try not to mention it too much because people tend to hate you for being able to just slip that in, you know, and then. But yeah, there's not too much kind of intense questioning and discussion while it's -20 in Canada. As you can imagine, it's more like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going? And I find myself, and I now think back, and I find myself changing my behaviour to the environment. And you're like, am I just doing that because of the environment, or am I doing that because that's what that social cultural expectation of what a climbing instructor does compared to a, you know, paddling coach, or what, you know, these labels are that we've all got. But yeah, when it's -20, you don't want to like have a prolonged discussion about the various intricacies of a belay. You want to turn up, see that a belay is good, and move on again. You know, but I was also talking. I did a Mountain Training Association webinar at lunchtime today. I was talking to them about this. And I was like, when I was younger and teaching rock climbing in North Wales, you know, you come back from the day and you'd be like, yeah, I did 12 pitches today. What did you do? And they'd be like, I did 13. And you feel like a lesser instructor because someone had done more pitches of rock climbing than you. Now I find I'm really confident if I've only done 4, but those participants have left with loads more ideas and things to practice. So yeah, I think that it's swaying that way more in everything, to try to get people to experiment and do things more. But there's definitely, like, winter climbing is still one of those activities where people are best learning it on the bottom end of a rope and just following you around the mountains. Purely because it's too uncomfortable otherwise.
That's fair enough. Dan, if you were to down, what would you go with?
Oh, buy my book?
Other than spending money down.
I think the top tip for coaches is to understand what the participant's motivation is. Yeah, you know, there's this really simple idea of, are they there to enjoy, explore, excel, or embed? You know, which one of those 4 strands are they looking for from that day with you? And if you can understand that, you're then going to deliver to that person the day they want. There'll be some tuning around your delivery, but you'll be giving that person the day they want, and then you're coaching. You've done half the work already.
Cool. Happy days, man. Has anyone else got any questions?
There's no more questions in the chat, Simon. So Dan, thanks ever so much. Really good chat, really informative. I think you've plugged your book. I think a few people have worked out that you've written a book, and it's for sale and probably available on Amazon. I'd hazard.
I would much rather people went on the Prana blog and then use the discount code there for Adventure Sports Media House rather than giving Jeff Bezos any more money.
Thanks ever so much for your time, and we'll bring it to an official end. But obviously, as Dan said, he's going to stick around, and a few of the regulars also stick around. So please just stick around and enjoy the rest of the evening with everybody. But Dan, thanks ever so much. Really appreciate your time and everything. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot for coming along, everyone.
This was a With Dave production.